Thank you, everyone, for coming to developing ASP.NET AJAX controls with Silverlight. And thanks for all coming so early. It certainly feels like a very long wait staring at the title slide, so I appreciate your wait. My name is Nikhil Kothari. I'm a software architect at Microsoft working on the web platform. I work on ASP.NET, ASP.NET AJAX, as well as Silverlight. So this talk is interesting in the sense that it allows me to kind of bridge the two worlds that I sort of live in these days, where I'm working on AJAX as well as Silverlight. So I certainly have a vested interest in this sort of topic where it brings the two technologies together. So as a quick overview of what I'm going to talk, as I said, I look at Silverlight as a technology, as a great technology for ASP.NET AJAX scenarios to build on and leverage. To go beyond the browser and how they complement each other, that's the other interesting thing. So specifically, I'm going to try and do two things here. I'm going to build an AJAX control that uses Silverlight for its presentation. And secondly, I'm going to show you a little bit of managed code, a managed code control written in Silverlight that can then be fit into an ASP.NET AJAX application. There's a lot of coverage about the whole managed code programming model here. I think there were two talks this morning on building Silverlight applications in managed code, and my colleague Stefan tomorrow morning is going to cover more specifically this topic of leveraging managed code in your AJAX applications. The sort of twist I'm going to present here is specifically around how they tie with AJAX controls and ASP.NET server controls. I should also preface this talk with this is fairly new. This is all new technology. And some of the ideas I'm presenting here are early thoughts. We've implemented some of these early thoughts in controls that we're shipping, but there's a fair amount of experimentation still going on. The right models are yet to emerge and establish. So certainly, look at this presentation as an exploration of certain ideas and thought for, or food for thought and discussion in the days to come, and as you get the bits and start playing with them. So let's actually start with a demo first to kind of show what I'm talking about. We shipped this control, ASP called media control, in the ASP.NET AJAX Futures release that was just released yesterday. And it uses Silverlight to play media, whether it's video or audio, in your ASP.NET applications. So I'm going to give you a quick run through this. There's certainly been talks dedicated on integrating video at this conference. So let me start with a very simple page, not a fancy looking page by any means. Essentially all I've done is dropped a media control onto the page and set a property called media URL. So right off the bat, I can either type this in, obviously ASP called media in the source view, or I can go to design view and drag this in. And you get the ASP.NET metaphor for controls, where you're dragging and dropping. You can set properties via the property grid, like so. There's a whole bunch of properties that this control exposes. It does all of this standard ASP.NET controls design time experience, where you can pick the standard properties or choose a skin, for example. So this gives the ASP.NET developer experience. Beyond just that designer developer experience, it also gives you some capabilities like you can drop in this media control into a repeater and data bind the media URL. So now you've essentially taken the world of media and brought it to dynamic data scenarios where ASP.NET excels at. So let's look at what this page looks like. Let it load for a moment. OK. Well, and so the media starts playing because I had autoplay set to true. I'm going to pause this because I want to talk about what's going on. So underneath the covers, what this control rendered out was, first of all, an embed tag. And that's what brings in the Silverlight control into the browser. It's using an embed tag in Firefox. It uses an object tag in Internet Explorer. So the server control does the right things. It also outputs some script where it instantiates a player class that's associated with this embed tag. And so what you can see from here is, hey, I'm an ASP.NET developer. I don't have to think about what XAML it takes to implement a media player. I don't have to think about what script I have to write to handle the play button, handle the stop button, and standard media control things. I just drop this control, and I have this experience that I can go use. So not everyone wants a media control that looks like this. In fact, one of the strengths of Silverlight is that you can completely customize your experience. So let's actually go do that. Essentially, what I can go ahead and do is go to Design View, pick a skin. I can pick different skins, like, for example, I think the Xbox one, or a very simple one. Let me pick that. And you can see the preview sort of changes. I can save it out. Hit refresh. Oops, I closed it. And now you can see I've got this experience where all I did was pick a different skin. So it doesn't stop quite there. The customization obviously can go further, where I can, instead of picking a sort of stock skin, I can go and export the XAML associated with the skin and tweak it to my heart's content in the designer, in Expression. I've gone ahead and done that, and I'll show specifically the Expression design scenario as we start building some of these scenarios. Essentially, here's some XAML, essentially the XAML that implements this media player. And you can see there's a lot of XAML, but it specifically speaks to designers, where they can control the colors, they can control the animations, they can use the timeline editor, all of these things that are very natural to designers. That's now wrapped into a server control, so developers don't have to continually think about it. So I've gone ahead and customized the skin, a very subtle customization, which just involves changing some colors. And I chose that by specifying XAML URL to be simpleskin.xaml. And now you can see it's the same skin, but the transport, you can see the transport controls are now sort of black instead of gray. And I did that just by changing the colors in the designer. So this is the video from Halo 3 trailer. So far, so good. I mean, I've got a basic media experience. I can customize the XAML. But how can this media experience fit better into an ASP.NET page, and how does ASP.NET actually provide value in the media scenario? What I can go ahead and do, let me close this. Let me bring up this other page I have. And this page has a media control. I'm also handling a couple of events. These are events raised by the client-side script media player, and I'm handling them down here in JavaScript. So for example, I'm listening to the chapter changed event, and I'm getting the standard ASP.NET AJAX experience, where I can $get to, or I can use the sender, use its chapters property to get the list of chapters, and then get the image URL off the chapter that was just played. Or I can listen to markers, where markers were introduced at the time of encoding the media, and I can listen to events raised by the media control. Specifically, there were events raised by Silverlight that are handled by the script player control, and then raised as script events that are natural to the ASP.NET AJAX developer. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm looking at the arguments coming in the event, getting the marker off of that, and getting the text off of that. And what I'm going to do here in this scenario is implement sort of a closed captioning UI in my page. And this is where you can see the confluence of Silverlight and HTML kind of working together.
I claim this planet
let me actually pause this, or lower the volume just a little bit. You'll watch this area here, where as so you can see as the media is playing, it's showing marker information. So this clip is fairly humorous. So I'll let you enjoy it for 30 seconds.
I claim this planet in the name of the Earth.
claim this planet in the name of Mars. Isn't that lovely?
Look, Bud, I've got news for you. I have already claimed this bit of dirt for the Earth, and there just ain't room enough on this planet for the two of us.
I do believe you are right.
Little does he realize that I have on my disintegration-proof vest. You may fire when ready, Grizzly.
So that was funny. It was certainly getting a little old on me when I was, repeatedly watching this practicing, and that's when I decided I should get some other videos for the first 2 or 3 demos, just so it doesn't get repetitive. But it's certainly worth showing it. Certainly, has a laugh associated with it. So anyway, this kind of shows the media control that we're shipping in its very sort of basic usage. There's certainly a lot more bells and whistles to it that more media-focused talk would actually cover. But the reason why I presented this was to kind of give you a flavor for an ASP.NET AJAX control that's using Silverlight for its presentation. Specifically, it's using the media element inside XAML to display media, as well as all the transport controls were all implemented in XAML. So that's kind of the example of things to come. So let me now switch to slides for a few moments. So there are 2 sort of slides in terms of concepts. The first is using Silverlight and AJAX controls, and that's what you just saw. And as I was saying, it's great for leveraging the UI capabilities of Silverlight, whether it's vector graphics or media. The fact that these are scriptable allows your AJAX controls to interact with them just like it interacts with the HTML DOM. So that's sort of the natural sort of integration between your HTML world and the Silverlight world. The key thing here is it enables you to incrementally enrich your application. You don't have to go and rewrite your entire application in XAML. You have a portion of your app, whether it's for showing media or showing some sort of rich data visualization, you can start using Silverlight in there. And ASP.NET helps you preserve the programming model that you're used to in your team. And so the model here is essentially you have this XAML UI that's embedded logically in your AJAX control, and that XAML UI is sort of implementation detail. Developers program against the AJAX control, or you might have a server control associated with that AJAX client-side control that's then used to program on the server, kind of like the media control. So the second sort of interesting scenario is, as you have seen, Silverlight provides a model for incorporating managed code into your applications. And that's certainly valuable when you have a sophisticated application or sophisticated component that's fairly involved. And so you can go write this control that's built in managed code, and now you want to fit it into your ASP.NET application for a variety of reasons. And so providing an AJAX API on top of that Silverlight control lets you kind of make that bridge between the 2 worlds. And again, the model's similar here. The only thing is the AJAX control in script is more of a wrapper around the actual implementation in Silverlight, as opposed to it strictly being an implementation detail. Does that make sense? So we're going to, I guess I have a slide on AJAX controls. Let me kind of just get a sense of how many people are familiar with sort of how you go about writing AJAX controls. A few hands. So I have a very simple demo that's got nothing to do with Silverlight. It's just about a hello world AJAX control that I'll talk about first in 5 minutes, and then we'll look at Silverlight specifically. So at a concept level, AJAX controls are regular server controls. They render out HTML, but in addition, they render out script includes, as well as some script instantiate different script components that are in those script includes. To do that, they implement iScript control, which allows them to participate in the overall sort of script processing, script rendering on the server by registering with Script Manager. And Script Manager basically asks every iScript control for a set of script references. Those are the scripts that are included into the page. And something called script descriptors, which describe instances of script objects to be created when the page is loaded. So in general, when you're writing an AJAX control, you implement iScript control, and that's how you start. We have a control called a XAML control as part of, along with the media control that we just shipped. It actually implements iScript control and simplifies some of these things. And so I'm going to use that for the Silverlight specific controls that I'll show. But let's actually switch to demos and show you that hello world control really quick before I move on to Silverlight. So I have a hello world page, which is truly hello world. It's basically a label that handles the click event, prompts me for a name. I can type in that. So nothing fancy. It's just a very basic hello world control. And let's look at how that was implemented. So first, let's look at the script. Essentially, I've written a class, the hello control, and it happens to derive from sys.ui.control. And that's sort of part of the ASP.NET AJAX client framework that allows me to associate script with UI elements, DOM elements on the page. And in my initialize method, I'm basically attaching to the click event. And once my handler is attached and invoked, I essentially prompt for name, get the element I'm associated with, and set the text on that element. The one additional thing I'm doing here is I have a format string that's a property on the hello control. And this is going to be a property that's set from the server when I talk about the server control next. So let's look at that server control. And this is where now this is the sort of the example of writing an AJAX server control. So I have a class called hello world. It derives from control, implements iScript control like I was describing. It has a few properties like any other server control, nothing fancy here, CSS class. And here's the hello format that I'm actually going to send down to the client. So by having this property on the server control, I'm enabling server control developer or page developers on the server to set properties that then affect the runtime behavior of the script. In on pre-render, which happens right before the control's rendered, I'm going to go ahead and look for the script manager on the page. If the script manager was not found, I'm going to raise an exception so that the page developer gets an error message saying a script manager control is needed. And if I do have it, I'm going to go ahead and register myself with that script manager. And then along comes render when I'm actually rendering out the HTML. In addition to rendering out the HTML, where that's just a span tag, I am also rendering out I'm also calling out register script descriptors. And what that does is tells the script manager, I'd like to register some script descriptors which describe the script classes I want to go create on the client. So here's get script descriptors. I essentially create a control descriptor because I have a control on the client. This is the type of the control. If you remember, that's essentially that name there. And here's the client ID, which is the ID of the span that was generated into the HTML. So now, in the browser, what's going to happen is that this class is going to get instantiated, and it's going to get associated with this HTML element. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is add some properties onto this descriptor so that I can initialize the instance that was created. And specifically, I'm going to go ahead and set the hello format property. So if you remember, the hello control had a getter and a setter for the hello format. And I'm going to go ahead and set that to the hello format that was set on the server. And finally, the other member on iScript controls get script references, which allows the control to send down some script. So what I'm going to go ahead and send down is hello.js. And what I've done in this control is package this JavaScript as a resource in my assembly, so it's very easy to deploy this control to the server. Essentially, it's this file here, which is marked as an embedded resource. So it's marked as an embedded resource. It gets embedded into the assembly, the control assembly. And it's registered as a web resource as metadata here, web resource, hello.js, and its content type is text/JavaScript. Essentially what this does is it marks that resource as it can be exposed to the web. That's all this registration does. So once I've done that, I can go ahead and create a script reference to that saying hello.js in this assembly and hand that out to Script Manager. So let's look at what happened in the page when this was rendered. So here's one of the script references. The actual information about the web resource is actually encrypted into this query string parameter. So one of these represents hello.js. And finally, here's at the bottom of this page is the result of that descriptor. Essentially, I'm creating an instance of that type, that's the one that I specified in the descriptor, associated with the hello world HTML element, and I'm going to go ahead and set this property on that instance. So this is sort of a whirlwind kind of 5-minute tour of writing an AJAX control, a very simple AJAX control, but it has the basic concepts. iScript control, set of script references, one or more script references, and script descriptors, again, one or more of those that describe instances of script objects to be created. Like I said, the XAML control that we ship actually does a bunch of these things. So in the sample that I'm going to show next, I actually won't specifically implement iScript control myself. I'll be using the implementation of the XAML control. So before I go on to the next one, any questions on this? And yeah, I can't see hands. Maybe if I do miss it, just shout out. As we go forward, if there are questions, feel free to kind of ask along the way. OK, so what I'm going to go and build now is actually a slideshow control. And some folks might have seen it from my talk yesterday where I used a slideshow scenario in my application. So let me just show you the example working first. So here's a slideshow control. It's using Silverlight for showing smooth transitions between photos. And it fits naturally into the HTML page. I can go ahead and click on links, and it will just work naturally. I can go ahead and enter comments. So this is just a regular ASP.NET page, and it's using Silverlight for enhancing the presentation of the pictures themselves. So let's actually look at implementing a subset of this functionality that's in the slideshow control. What I'm going to go ahead and do first is show you a starter version of the slideshow. So essentially, the experience that I have with a server control is that of a repeater, where it's repeating the images and the text associated with it in a sequence. And let's look at the source. Essentially, I have a slideshow control. It's a server control. And it behaves just like a repeater or a grid view that you might have used in the past. It's associated, it's a data-bound control, and its data source ID is set to photos data source. And photos data source is an object data source. So you can see that this control is leveraging the ASP.NET model for data binding, which is very familiar to page developers. It has an item template, and that's the template that's used to render each item, the image and the associated caption. So this is a basic control, doesn't use Silverlight yet, and that's going to be our starting point. So let's look at the slideshow control itself in the code. So as I said, it behaves like a repeater. In fact, it derives from a repeater. It has some properties like CSS class, title field, URL field. And that's pretty much it, in the sense it inherits all the functionality from the repeater control, which repeats the item template for each item that's in the data source and generates the template. So what I'm going to go ahead and do first is start incorporating Silverlight. And to do that, the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is write some XAML to use for my slideshow. So I'm going to use a very simple XAML XAML file, and it essentially has canvas as the root element. There's an image for the background, and then there's another a rectangle that's filled with an image that's the photo that I want to show. So this is a very, very simple XAML file. Doesn't do much. And for our particular scenario that I'm going to implement here, there's no next and previous buttons. It just every click basically progresses to the next image. But you can think of extending that with actual UI for buttons. So I've got my XAML, and the first thing I want to go ahead and do now is write the script that will work against this XAML DOM. So again, I have a starting point here just so I don't have to start from a blank script file. I'm going to implement a slideshow class. And this slideshow class, instead of deriving from sys.ui.control, like the hello world did, instead of that, it's going to derive from sys.preview.ui.xaml.control. And this base class does a bunch of interesting things, like detect whether Silverlight is actually installed. And if it's not installed, it places the prompt saying, here's where you can go to get it, and handles all of that. It also listens for when the XAML gets loaded, because that happens asynchronously. So it does all of the plumbing associated with using Silverlight. And so I'm going to go ahead and derive from that. What it does is when the XAML actually gets loaded into this into the Silverlight control, a method is going to be called that I can override, called XAML initialize. So let me go ahead and write that. And it's a function. And within this function, what I'm going to go ahead and say is root element equals this dot get root element. And that's a get root element is a property of the base class that I'm inheriting from. And what that gives me is a reference to this root element, the canvas node up at the top. And from that, now I can use essentially the scriptable API that is exposed by the XAML DOM in the Silverlight plugin. So I can do something like this dot slideshow element equals root element dot find name, and I can look at my XAML, and here's a canvas tag that's been ID'd with the x:name attribute as slideshow. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that out and get a reference to it. And now I can actually start calling APIs on it. I can do the same thing again. I can repeat the find name kind of API to do things like fetch the photo, fetch the image brush that's going to actually be used to show the image, and fetch things like the text block that I have here to show the caption of the image. So I can actually do all that. But rather than typing it in, what I'm going to go ahead and do is copy some code and remove my previous implementation here. So what I've done now basically is extracted out some interesting elements, and I can go start programming against them. Before I start doing that, I'll go ahead and implement the dispose logic so I don't forget it, and null out those references at the end, and ignore some of the extra elements that aren't there yet. They'll be filled in as we go along the demo. So what I've gone ahead and done is, this is an interesting line here. Once I've extracted the slideshow element, I also want to track clicks on that. Remember I said the click button, or the click event, is what's going to progress our slideshow from one slide to the next slide. So I can go ahead and listen to events just like I would listen to events on the HTML DOM. So add event listener, the name of the event is mouse left button down, and I'm going to go ahead and create a delegate to my on slideshow mouse down method, which doesn't exist yet, but I'm going to go add that. So on slideshow mouse down takes a sender and event args, and what I'm going to go ahead and do here is progress the photo. So first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is old index equals this dot photo index, this dot photo index plus plus, if this dot photo index, if it goes off to the end, then I want to loop back. And go ahead and say this dot photo index equals 0. And then finally, I want to go ahead and show that photo. And I have this method started here, this dot show photo, passing the old index, new index. So now what I want to do is use the XAML DOM, the APIs exposed by the XAML, to actually switch the display of the photos. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is essentially, say this dot photo image 1 dot image source equals this dot photos, so new index dot URL, and I can do something similar for the title. Change the title labels text property to the title property on the photo. And I'm using this photos collection. Where did this photos collection come from? Essentially, I have a property here, getSetPhotos, which is a collection of photo objects. Each photo object has a title property and a URL property. And you'll see how that kind of connects the dots between the server and the client. The server is going to do data binding. It's a repeater control. It's going to generate a list of photos, and it's going to send that to the client as a property setter on this. And so we'll see that in just a moment. I'm passing in, this should be this dot photo index. Thanks. So I'm passing in, yes, I'm passing in the old index and the new index. For now, I'm just using the new index. Later, when we implement sort of the smooth transition, we'll use the old index as well. So let's see. I think this is ready in its very basic form. Essentially, it's going to go from one image to the next image. There's no transition involved just yet. So I have some script ready for using in my server control. So let's switch now to the server control. So again, the server control is the demo slideshow control. It's a subset of what the full slideshow uses. It's a repeater, and it's not going to implement iScript control, as I said. Instead, it's going to use the XAML control. So first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is create a derived version of the XAML control. Class slideshow XAML control derives from XAML. Hang on to my owner here. Just construct this. Go ahead and hang on to that. The XAML control now exposes properties that are exposed by the Silverlight plugin. One of the properties is windowless, and that allows you to control whether the Silverlight plugin is windowed or windowless. And windowless is useful if you want to layer the Silverlight control using z-index in HTML, where you have overlaying content, and windowless actually enables you to layer that, layer the actual visuals in the right order, versus windowed controls always appear all the way on top. So as I've mentioned a couple times, the XAML control implements iScript control for me. It also registers with the script manager, so I don't have to take care of that. It implements getScript references, where it sends down the script that contains sys.preview.ui.xaml.control, the implementation of that base class. So all of that's taken care of. It also renders out a script descriptor, but now I want to customize that script descriptor with data specific to the slideshow. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is override getScript descriptors and customize them. And I'm just going to copy some code right now. Oops. So what I'm doing is getting the script descriptor from the base class, and adding the photos property onto that script descriptor with the data that's collected in the slideshow control. So let's look at the data. As each item is data bound in the repeater is enumerating over the data source, the records in the data source, and creating items. As each item is created, I'm going ahead and listening to that and pulling out the title and the URL from each item, and I'm creating a array list of hash tables for that. That's my data, essentially. And I'm passing that down here to the photos property. It's going to be passed to the photos property of the client-side slideshow control. OK, so I've got my slideshow XAML control. Now I need to actually go ahead and use it. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is override and inside my implementation of on pre-render, I'm going to create the XAML control. So I'm creating a XAML control, the one that I just wrote, setting its XAML URL to the XAML URL of the slideshow. This allows the slideshow to be customized with different XAML files, just like the media control was customized. Set the CSS class, set an ID. And here's where I'm adding the script reference for the slideshow itself. So I'm passing out demo.slideshow.js in this assembly, adding that to the scripts collection of the XAML control itself. And finally, telling the XAML control that the client type is this slideshow type that I was working on in my JavaScript file right here. So I have that. Now it comes time to render it. So let's override render. So as I showed, the current experience that the slideshow creates is this repeater. It's like a list of images. And that's the implementation I get from the repeater class itself. So instead of doing that, what I'm going to go ahead and do is just render out the XAML control. I need to create a field. OK, so let's look at what this does. Build it. And go back to my demo page. So it's the same demo slideshow. Now it's actually going to use this XAML URL to actually create a richer experience rather than a list of pictures. So there you see, instead of a repeater, now I have this actual XAML UI. And as I implement it in the script, clicks on the picture will progress it to the next picture. And as you might expect, I was just changing the image URL. I wasn't actually doing a transition. So it's fairly basic right now. So let me go ahead and show you now. So this XAML file here was very simple. It didn't contain any information about transitions. Let me switch to a different XAML file. This is slightly more complex. It has a storyboard which describes the animation to perform to switch from one image to another. And I'll show an example of this in Expression in just a moment. And it has two photos. The trick here is basically it's using two photos, one to show the photo that was there before, one to show the photo that was there after, and is doing a transition between the two. So I have two photos here, and the rest of it is the same. So now previously I was programming against photo 1. Now I also need to program against photo 2, for example. So I'm going to go back to my JavaScript file and find a few more elements. So I'll go ahead and copy some script here. So you can see I'm doing yet more of the same pattern here where I'm finding elements from the XAML tree. And essentially after this, I need to go ahead and say, if I have a photo transition, or if I don't have a photo transition, let me actually change the order of this. If I don't have a photo transition, just go ahead and do what I was doing before. But if I do have a transition defined in the XAML, I'll go ahead and do a better transition. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the transition if it's playing already. So if I click fast, multiple times really fast, the previous animation is still playing. I'll stop that one. I'll show the the current photo. I'll set that to photo 2 essentially. Set its opacity to 1 so it actually shows up. Change photo 1's opacity to 0 so it doesn't show, and the transition will actually make it appear. And then set photo 1 to the new image, which is going to show up once the transition plays, which happens right here. So what you can see here is the script is now interacting with APIs exposed to the XAML DOM. Previously, I was setting properties. You can also set call methods. So let's save that and build. Go back to my ASPX page. And now you can see that didn't quite happen. I should have picked a different XAML file. Yes. So demo slideshow.xaml, not the one before. But you can see, so the script was programmed to work with both a transition as well as without a transition. So the idea here is your script file has a certain set of known things it goes and looks for, and the designer can come in and add some animations. As long as they're named the same, the pattern is basically relying on ID matching, that XAML can be customized and the same script can go ahead and work. So now that I've actually changed my XAML, you can see now it actually plays the transition. So there are two photos. The photo in front is updated to the current photo. The photo in the back is updated to the new photo. The photo in front is faded away, and the photo in the back is faded in. So that's basically the idea of this transition here. So let's actually look at some XAML editing, because I've been showing this in Visual Studio, which isn't the best way to see XAML. So I've got animations and all these kinds of things going on here. Let's actually open up this in Expression. So here's the same source view. It's got the same XAML. If I go into Design View, you can see I've got a preview of this. Let me actually change a couple of things just so it's more readily apparent what's happening. I'll change photo 1's background color. What happened to... Well, that's quite not working for me. But the idea here, also I don't have a whole lot of space in the UI with this resolution. Let me actually shrink that. Not that. As you can see, I'm not. Oh, there you go. Something's showing up. I'm not a designer, and I'm not certainly very well versed with this tool just yet. So I can click on Photo 2, for example, create a new transition. Create a new transition. Photo transition 2. Create it as a resource. And what I can do now, for example, is select Photo 2. Oh gosh, I just can't see the time. Oh, there you go. I can create, for example, a keyframe at 2 seconds, and what I can do is at 2 seconds this photo becomes twice as large, and it also becomes at 1 second here. I can go ahead and change the opacity, and so as the idea is I can go ahead and design my animation. So this is not quite working for me. Ignore this for a moment. I have a built XAML file. Always have a backup. This one. And you can see what changed here is that storyboard became a lot more complex than the one before. The one before was just animating opacities, and this one's, in addition to animating opacities, is also animating the size, for example. So let me pick this one instead now and go to my page here. And you can see I also changed some colors, and now it's animating outward. So just by changing the transition in expression, and if I was more skilled at designing the stuff, then I would be successful at it. I can go ahead and create interesting slideshows without changing the code. So the key point why I was kind of trying to go through that exercise was to show the pattern at play. When you're writing an ASP.NET control, in the past, with regular HTML, controls typically had a lot of properties, like on the order of 50 properties to control various aspects. But that doesn't give the full sort of range of designability that you can actually achieve with Silverlight. And so the idea here is to use a XAML file as the whole template for your UI and let the designer kind of go crazy with expression and do sort of all sorts of interesting things in the tool, as opposed to setting a lot of properties on the server control. So that's kind of the reason why I was going through that, to kind of give you an experience where just changing the XAML completely changes the experience. OK. So at this point, we have a simple slideshow control. I'm not going to go through the experience of building the full slideshow control, but I'll just show you little pieces that are interesting in that. For example, the full slideshow control that I was using this XAML file, which in addition to transitions also had a media element, which is the audio track for the slideshow. And the script file associated with the slideshow does something like, in its XAML initialize, looks for play and stop buttons. And if there are play and stop buttons, it also looks for an audio track. So it's all the same pattern all over, finding elements by name and conditionally enabling functionality if the element exists in the design that's in the XAML file. And when the play button is pressed, it goes ahead and calls play on the audio track, which plays music. And it uses an HTML timer to automatically increment the pictures instead of waiting for the user to click. So that's kind of an example of taking this further in terms of on the script end as well as on the XAML end. Does that make sense? OK. So let's switch gears a little bit, and I'll show you a different control. So far what we've been seeing is XAML and script. And what I want to show you right now is XAML with some managed code. I'll go ahead and bring up this page. It's going to be a chart control. Let's actually run this. So essentially, I'm doing data visualization with XAML. I can select a stock, and it refreshes the page, brings in new data, and shows the stock in XAML. I can also do this on the client so that I don't have a whole page refresh. I can type in different symbols, and essentially what I have is snapshots of like 5 years worth of data or further for some tickers, and pull down that data and use the script API exposed by the chart control and pass the data into Silverlight for rendering as a chart. And let's look at that a little bit more. So essentially what I have here is a chart control. I'm not going to step through building this. It's already pre-built, but it's doing the same concepts again. Chart control, that's a data-bound control. So it's, again, using ASP.NET data binding on the server. I've got fields for what's the X field on the series that I'm plotting, what's the Y field. And then in perform data binding, where I'm stepping through each record in the data source, I'm essentially building up a string that's a sequence of points, X and Y, that I'm going to pass down to the client. And then that's sort of the standard ASP.NET data bound control part of it. The XAML part of it is exactly the same as what I just did before. I have a create XAML control method where I'm creating a chart XAML control that's derived from XAML. It's associated with a client type called the chart class, which is in charting.js. And just like before, I'm customizing the control descriptor associated with that chart, passing down the data, that sequence of X and Y coordinates. and the title for the chart. And then when I use this on the page, essentially I have a chart control that's pointing to an object data source for its data, and it's pointing to a XAML URL for its actual UI. And so when I view this in the browser, you actually get this chart. If I change the ticker using this drop-down list, it posts back to the server. I pick a different symbol, update the chart, and it sends down a new sort of sequence of points. When I do this on the client, I'm essentially using a web request to go back to the server to fetch the list of data. And when the data comes back to the client, I'm using the scriptable API exposed by the chart control. So here's the chart. I find that chart control. Essentially what this gives me is the client-side counterpart of this chart control that we'll see in a moment, and call set data title and set data, which updates the Silverlight control. So let's look at the script a little bit. So again, you'll see similarities between this and the slideshow. So I have a chart control that derives, if I go all the way to the bottom, derives from the same XAML control base class. In its XAML initialize, it listens to a certain set of events raised by the Silverlight control. But more specifically, what I wanted to show here is when you set when the script sets data, the actual x1, y coordinates, it calls load data, which goes into, this is the Silverlight control, which exposes a scriptable API that has a set data method. So let's look at how this is working. So here's chart.xaml, and again, to give you an idea of what this looks like in the tool, let me try how successful I am this time. So you can see here's a chart. It's a static chart, and there's a bunch of XAML behind it. And the designer can, again, come along and actually customize this completely, where you can change where the title is, you can change the font, you can change the colors of the stroke, and position them. All of that can be done independent of the server control. The other interesting thing here that's going on in this chart example is I have a class associated with this canvas that's implemented inside chart.dll. This is where managed code comes in. So I have a chart class on the client now, also written in C#, that derives from Canvas. So this is where I'm using the managed code programmability. And I'll do things similar to script. Essentially, I can do find name for each of the elements that are in the XAML file. But here I can now, essentially, if you look at this project, there's a number of classes here where I've implemented a full chart control with a data model and a view that's separated. So you can use all of the power of .NET in terms of factoring your code in the right way as you see fit, and have that. And you'll see a lot more of managed code in the other talks I alluded to. But specifically here, what I wanted to show was this chart control has been annotated as scriptable. What this means is that script can actually now call into this chart and the managed methods that are on this chart that have been marked as scriptable. So let's go all the way to the bottom here. So I have two methods. I have a method here called setData that takes a string, which is a sequence of x and y coordinates, and the title for that series. And it's also marked as scriptable. So to kind of go full circle on this, the XAML gets loaded. It points to the DLL, which also gets loaded. This class gets to run, and the scriptable method actually gets registered on the scripting API, which this JavaScript file can now go ahead and use. So set data, where I'm passing in the data and the title. So this goes into the managed code in Silverlight, where the managed code can now go ahead and use this data to actually plot the chart. Once I've plotted the chart, I might actually want to make it interactive. For example, in this sample, let me go to the previous sample. For example, in this sample, as I mouse over, that's not visible down there. As I mouse over this, it's showing me what the x coordinate is and what the y value is for that coordinate down here, which is being updated in the HTML page. So not only can I push data into Silverlight, but I can also receive data as part of event handlers. So to support that, essentially I created two properties on this managed code. Selected x value, selected y value, they're both marked as scriptable. And I have a selection changed event, which is also marked as scriptable. So let's go back to the script now and see what's happening here. So when I call chart.selectionChange and I pass in a function delegate, that's essentially I'm subscribing to that event that is implemented by managed code. In my selection changed handler, which is down here, I'm raising a script event, which is much more natural to an AJAX developer. And the implementation of my script handler looks like that. Selection, and then I can fetch properties off of the scriptable chart object. For example, the selected value property. And jumping back to the implementation of the script chart, it has a selected value property, which is a JSON object which has x and y values, which are fetched off of the chart object, the managed object. So here you can see I'm calling chart.selectedXValue. That's a call back into managed code over here. So this kind of shows you bidirectional communication. I can push data into the Silverlight control. I can fetch data out as part of event handlers or properties. So to kind of sum this up in terms of a useful scenario, I have another page here called the log viewer. And essentially what this is doing is pulling out data from my website logs and charting those collected analytics data. And essentially this is pulling out data from like end of last year through last week. And you can see these are a number of page views. There are some spikes, and then there's a sort of a regular weekly pattern, essentially. What I can go ahead and do, this chart control supports selecting a range. So I can, figure out what happened on my blog when that caused those spikes. I can select that range, choose zoom. That raises an event called the range change event, which the script on the page listens to go back to the server and fetch the blog post that I made during that period to see what caused that spike. And presumably one of these posts was popular that caused that spike here. I can go ahead and reset this. So one thing you'll notice here is the smooth zoom in and zoom out. And this can be done with Silverlight because you've got scriptable interactive vector graphics on the client, and it would be very hard to kind of do that with server-side generated images. You'd kind of get a before image and an after image, and that's kind of what you'd have to settle for. So this kind of shows you the capabilities of Silverlight and how you can tie that with capabilities that you have on your page. For example, this particular scenario is something I would like. I have analytics on my page, but that sort of gives me this raw data. It doesn't correlate with activity that I did or activity in my blog. So this kind of shows how you have interesting data visualization scenarios. So that's kind of the two demos I wanted to show. Any questions? I understand this is all fairly new concepts here. There are no books available right now. As I said, this is all very new. In fact, I would love to hear feedback on what do you think of this model in terms of associating ASP.NET controls with XAML, using the XAML as a template. What are its limitations? What are its plus points? Experiment with this model some more, and figure out where it goes. The question is, are the samples going to be available? Yes, they will be on my blog once I get back to Redmond. So let me see if there's a couple more just recap slides here. So yeah, the recap was Silverlight presents a DOM over the XAML UI, just like you have the HTML DOM where you can navigate the DOM, find elements by ID, create new elements, and add them into a tree. You can do the same thing with Silverlight over XAML instead. Things like find name, I use that API to fetch elements. I used add event listener to subscribe to events. And so script can now interact with these DOM elements, whether it's setting properties or calling methods, playing animations, all of those types of things. The other thing beyond XAML is Silverlight hosts managed code. It hosts the CLR, and managed code can expose scripting entry points. So you can actually have managed code interact in a bidirectional way with your HTML page. It's not just an island of functionality, but they're fairly well, they can be tied together. In terms of what ASP.NET provides, we provide the XAML.control base class to simplify the act of embedding the Silverlight control plugin itself, looking for whether the right version's installed, and if not, showing the prompt. All of that infrastructure is taken care of by that base class. On the server control, we provide the XAML control as a base class for creating more specialized XAML scenarios. The media control also uses XAML control underneath the covers. The slideshow did, the chart did, and it can be customized for the individual scenarios. And the goal behind this, obviously, is to provide an API on top of Silverlight that fits in very naturally both on the server end and on the client end with ASP.NET AJAX. So I don't have any pointers to books like someone asked, but there are some resources. Silverlight.net is your starting point for all things Silverlight. I should have also put down ajax.asp.net is the starting point for all things AJAX, ASP.NET AJAX. There are some blogs. The first one is the URL for my blog where I'll be posting the samples. Related sessions, the one that I'd highly recommend checking out is tomorrow. It is at 8:30, Dev 10, extending the programming model with Silverlight. And that'll delve into more of the managed code scenarios, using managed code to do things like networking requests, isolated storage if you want to store data offline, use the file open dialog box to read files, as well as interact with the HTML DOM from managed code. So I'd highly recommend that one. The key point here is to obviously go ahead and download the bits and play with them. It's a fairly new model. I'd love to hear feedback on what you think of this model as a way to write sort of a whole new generation of ASP.NET controls. And with that, I think I have about a little over 10 minutes for Q&A. If folks want to come to the mic or that would be great. Say that again? Oh, sure. You want to copy the URLs? Yep. Go ahead. Oh, quick reminder. Thanks to everyone who came. There's also some posters here for Silverlight if you'd like to pick them up. They're right on the side here. Thank you.